Are there any secret rooms that we can't see?
Here,
Okay.
that's the only
Do you know where the other ones are? The secret rooms?
secret room.
Yeah, behind a wall or something like that.
For decades, the world was told who Michael Jackson was, a star turned scandal.
I did find underwears that were men's briefs in the walk-in closet.
A genius turned monster. Every headline, every broadcast, every accusation built the same image. But when the FBI uncovered a secret vault hidden inside Neverland, what they found inside began to tell a very different story, one that could change how the world sees him forever. The trap that was set. In 1993, Michael Jackson was accused of taking advantage of a 13-year-old boy named Jordan Chandler. The shock was immediate. For decades, he had been known as a prodigy who gave back through music, charity, and compassion. Overnight, that image shattered. Police raided his Los Angeles home, seizing personal belongings and photographing every room while journalists gathered outside his gates. The investigation was meant to be confidential, but it quickly became a global spectacle. According to later reports, as the media frenzy grew and the case overwhelmed local authorities, the FBI quietly joined in. Officially, the FBI said they were only there to oversee the case, to make sure it followed procedure, but leaked documents suggested it was driven by pressure, not evidence. Broadcasters were earning record-breaking ratings, advertisers were profiting from the coverage, and entertainment executives were watching one of their biggest assets being dismantled on live television. At the same time, Michael was doing something that few artists had ever done. Through a series of business negotiations, he had acquired half of Sony's publishing catalog, the same catalog that included songs by the Beatles and Elvis Presley. It was a historic shift in control. For the first time, an artist wasn't just performing the music, he owned it. Insiders later claimed that this move disrupted a system built on dependency, where artists were meant to create, not control. To the people who had long profited from his image and work, Michael had crossed an invisible line. He had stopped being a performer and had become a businessman with leverage worth billions. Not long after, the press turned. Publications that once called him revolutionary began labeling him eccentric. Late-night hosts mocked him nightly, and tabloid headlines became more outrageous each week. Interviews were edited to make him sound unstable, and rumors replaced facts entirely. Former employees came forward with paid confessions, and public sympathy began to fade. According to reports, some journalists later admitted that stories about Michael guaranteed higher ratings than any other topic in entertainment. What began as an accusation had turned into an industry of its own, one that thrived on his humiliation. Accounts from his inner circle claimed that Michael was being tracked. They said leaks about his private life and finances reached news outlets within hours of meetings or phone calls. There were even rumors that certain investigators were sharing details directly with reporters. None of it could be proven, but Michael saw the pattern. Every major success he celebrated was followed by a headline meant to bury it. He started to believe that he was being hunted in plain sight, not just by accusers, but by a network of people determined to keep him under control. That belief became a grim reality in November 2003. 70 armed officers surrounded Neverland Ranch, Michael's vast California estate, the one place he said made him feel truly happy. Helicopters circled above. Reporters gathered at the gates before the warrant was even approved. Witnesses said the atmosphere was electric, a mix of tension, curiosity, and quiet excitement. The officers' expressions were caught between professionalism and performance. Some moved with purpose, while others whispered to one another, grinning as if part of a show. According to later reports, audio recovered from the scene captured an officer saying, "Make sure this looks good for the feed." Another voice replied, "They're already live." Inside the house, drawers were overturned, cabinets emptied, and cameras followed every movement. The air was thick with adrenaline. Some officers seemed genuinely eager, convinced they would find proof. Others looked almost uncertain, aware that nothing truly incriminating was appearing. But that didn't stop them. They continued searching, driven more by the spectacle than the warrant. When the raid ended, they had nothing. No evidence, no weapon, no crime. But by then, it no longer mattered. The image of his home being violated had already become global news. What none of them realized that day was that this wouldn't be the last time investigators entered those gates. Years later, after Michael's death, they would search the property again. And this time, what they uncovered inside would be far more gripping than anything they ever expected to find. Watching from a distance, Michael understood what had just happened. The law had been replaced by theater. His life was not being investigated. It was being broadcast. That night, the trust he still had in justice finally broke. He realized that his innocence could never survive the way his story was being told. From that point, his goal was no longer to defend himself publicly. It was to preserve his truth privately, in something that could not be edited, erased, or manipulated. That realization marked the beginning of what would one day become his greatest act of self-preservation: building the vault. By 2004, Michael Jackson's faith in the world had vanished. The 2003 raid had turned his home into a public crime scene. According to those close to him, that humiliation changed him completely. He no longer believed that privacy or fairness existed for someone of his fame. If his words could be twisted and his home invaded, he would build something no one could tamper with again. Months later, work quietly began at Neverland Ranch under the name Storage Renovation. Contractors thought it was a luxury archive for unreleased recordings, but some of the engineers later told investigators that the instructions were odd. The blueprints were incomplete, measurements missing, and wiring routes ended abruptly. It felt as if part of the design had been removed on purpose. The finished chamber was unlike any other room on the estate. It had reinforced steel walls, biometric entry, soundproof lining, and its own independent power supply. The temperature stayed constant year-round. From the outside, the entrance looked like decorative wall paneling beside the master suite. Inside, it was silent, cold, and deliberately anonymous. To staff, Michael described it as a music archive. He said he needed a secure space to protect master tapes and rare documents. But according to internal reports, the interior told another story. Shelves were marked private, legal audio, and confidential 2003. There were docking stations for external drives and terminals that could connect to hidden data ports. Some believed the system allowed him to back up recordings and evidence beyond the reach of investigators. When Michael died in 2009, the vault remained sealed. Years later, during a cold case review of the Neverland property, a young FBI analyst noticed an inconsistency. The electrical schematics for the master suite listed a power line that went nowhere. Using a thermal scanner, agents traced the heat pattern behind one decorative wall and detected a hollow space. They removed a section of paneling, revealing a metal surface and a biometric lock still active after years of disuse. After consulting estate officials, agents authorized entry. Inside were shelves of boxes, drives, and sealed containers preserved in perfect condition. According to those present, the air inside was colder than the rest of the house, as if untouched since the day it was built. What they uncovered inside rewrote the entire story of Michael Jackson's downfall. The Chandler setup. When investigators opened the first box in the vault, one folder immediately stood out. Its label read, "Chandler Conversation, 1993. Inside were brittle cassette tapes, handwritten notes, and photocopied forms yellowed with age. The recordings were faint but clear enough for experts to identify the main voice as Dr. Evan Chandler, the father of Jordan Chandler, the boy who had accused Michael Jackson in 1993. What they heard was not the sound of a father seeking justice. It was the outline of a plan. Analysts who reviewed the transcript said Chandler spoke about destroying Michael Jackson while arguing over custody of his son. He discussed settlement figures, press timing, and how the story would play to the public. According to those familiar with the files, there was no mention of evidence, only leverage. The conversation hinted that the accusation which shocked the world may have begun as a negotiation, not a confession. Beside the tapes lay several photocopied dental records. Each page listed medications used during a 1993 procedure on Jordan Chandler. Among the drugs was sodium amytal. Experts later told investigators that this sedative, once called truth serum, could blur memory and produce false recollections if administered under stress. According to marginal notes signed MJ, Michael believed the drug had been used to extract a statement from the boy while he was still sedated. The handwriting throughout the folder was unmistakably his. Across the top of one page, in heavy black ink, he had written, "When they silence me, this will speak." Beneath it were typewritten transcripts labeled "Phone Meeting, E. Chandler." The dialogue referred to network coverage, timing the release, and ensuring it hurts. Reviewers described the tone as calculated, almost rehearsed. Reports claimed that a private investigator working for Michael had traced calls between Chandler and entertainment lawyers weeks before the accusations were made public. Those communications reportedly involved potential payout numbers rather than legal complaints. If true, they supported the theory that the 1993 case was less about justice and more about extortion. Another section of the folder contained tabloid covers from that same year. Red circles marked the earliest headlines calling him Wacko Jacko. Next to one, Michael had written, They wrote the story before I could speak. To him, these clippings were proof that the scandal was scripted in advance, designed to destroy his credibility before any court could hear his side. For the agents reviewing the vault, these files were deeply unsettling. For Michael, they were a scar he never allowed to close. But the deeper they searched, the more they realized that headlines were only the surface of what had been done to him. Beyond the stories and broadcasts lay something darker, a record of how the hatred they helped create was fed back to his doorstep, one letter at a time. The letters of hate. As agents continued examining the vault, they noticed something odd on a thermal scan, a small cold spot behind the back shelf. When one of the technicians pressed along the wooden panel, it shifted slightly, revealing a hidden drawer that had no handle or keyhole. The drawer was cold and tightly sealed. Inside were hundreds of envelopes held together with old rubber bands, stacked neatly in rows. Some were unopened, others torn or partly burned. On the inside of the drawer, faint pencil marks read, "Keep them. Let them see." The drawer's contents shocked the team. These weren't contracts or recordings. They were letters, angry, venomous, and relentless. Many came from anonymous senders, written in uneven handwriting that mixed pen, marker, and sometimes typewriter ink. Some accused Michael of betraying his race or wanting to erase his color. Others used racial slurs or called him an insult to both sides. A few made direct threats to his family, promising to finish what the tabloids started. A reference to the sensational newspapers and gossip magazines that had spent years publishing stories that mocked his appearance, twisted his words, and turned his private struggles into public ridicule. According to the report compiled afterward, the correspondence stretched across more than 2 decades. The earliest were dated from the late 1980s, when his skin condition began to change. Others followed the 1993 allegations, each one darker in tone. Several contained magazine clippings where his image had been cut or defaced. Some included grainy photographs of his children marked with X's. Experts who later analyzed the material described it as the anatomy of celebrity hatred. But another, even more disturbing pattern appeared. Many letters were stapled to tabloid pages or transcripts from television talk, shows that had aired only days earlier. It was as though every broadcast sparked a fresh wave of hostility, a system where outrage was manufactured and then mailed to his doorstep. Estate notes suggested that Michael eventually began saving these letters intentionally. He wanted proof that the public's anger wasn't organic. It was cultivated. He sorted them by year, adding notes in the margins. After interview, same week as Sony leak, and sometimes simply lie. Many of these letters predated the vault itself, meaning he must have stored them elsewhere and later transferred them for safekeeping. It was meticulous work, the effort of a man turning pain into evidence. One envelope, however, stood apart. It bore no return address, only a single word stamped in red. Warning. The paper was creased and yellowed, but the ink was sharp, as if preserved on purpose. Inside was a typed message that read, "You are too powerful. They will not let you live long enough to own it all." The letter was dated early 1999, only months before his next major contract dispute with Sony. Agents reportedly fell silent as they read it. For investigators, the drawer exposed a world of unseen violence, an assault not with weapons, but with words. For Michael, it proved what he had suspected all along, that hatred could be engineered. Every insult, every threat, every racial attack had been planted and amplified by forces that needed the world to hate him. By the time the drawer was emptied, one truth had become unmistakable. His war had not only been fought in courtrooms and boardrooms, it had been fought through letters, headlines, and the quiet poison of public opinion. And at the very bottom of the stack, beneath the last bundle of envelopes, agents discovered something else, a set of documents hinting that this wave of hatred had not been spontaneous at all. It had been financed. The betrayal within. As agents worked through the vault's final section, they uncovered a folder that felt different from everything else. Its label was simple, Staff 2010. Inside were notes, letters, and photographs that turned their attention to one of the most controversial figures from Michael's inner circle, a former housekeeper named Adrienne McManus. She had spent years at Neverland Ranch, cleaning the rooms, serving guests, and seeing what few outsiders ever did. Her later interviews would reshape how the public remembered Michael Jackson. McManus had told the world that life inside Neverland was unlike any other workplace. She claimed that the staff operated under strict rules. No questions, no small talk, no autographs. "You don't question Mr. Jackson when his guests are here," she recalled being told. "Those are his guests, not yours. You just go do your job." According to her, everyone obeyed. The home, she said, ran on control, a place where curiosity could cost you your job. In her interviews, she described what she considered disturbing scenes. She claimed she once found underwear, both Michael's and children's, floating in the jacuzzi, either in the water or scattered on the floor. She said she often saw young boys staying overnight at the ranch, some sleeping in Michael's private quarters. The atmosphere, she said, felt strange, with children competing for his attention as if it were a prize. She remembered feeling uneasy but powerless, saying she had been forced to sign strict confidentiality contracts. According to her, there were even moments when she feared for her safety. She said that Michael's security staff warned her that if she ever spoke about what she saw, other employees will take care of you. These claims would later be repeated across tabloids, documentaries, and talk shows, shaping one of the darkest parts of his public story. Yet what the agents found in the vault told a different side. Among Michael's personal notes were diary entries that suggested he had long feared that those closest to him could be manipulated. One line read, "They will use my own people. They won't even know they're being used." Beside that page lay photocopies of what appeared to be media correspondence, letters from reporters offering payments for exclusive information about life inside Neverland. Some of the names listed were blurred out, but one memo mentioned former domestic staff, contacts secured. Another handwritten note beside it read, "They turned them into witnesses before I even knew the story." The folder also contained photographs and printed transcripts of recorded staff meetings. One image showed several employees sitting around a long dining table, their faces marked with circles in red pen. Next to the image, Michael had written, "Who do they talk to after hours?" An audio file recovered from the same folder captured two voices believed to be ex-employees discussing being approached by journalists. In the recording, a woman whispered, "They said I'll be safe if I just tell them what they want." His handwritten response below the transcript was brief. "They promised safety for betrayal." Investigators who studied the folder later said it was clear that Michael's paranoia had been grounded in experience. He had documented not only the scandals, but the machinery that created them. To him, Adrian McManus's eventual claims were not shocking. They were confirmation of what he feared all along, that his enemies would not need to invent stories if they could recruit those closest to him to tell them. The discovery of the staff 2010 folder painted a grim picture of isolation. It showed that Michael no longer trusted the people in his own home. He saw every staff change, every late-night visitor, and every misplaced item as a potential leak. His world had become a network of eyes and ears he could not control. For the agents who examined those files, one final note stood out. On a half-torn page, written in hurried script, were 6 words that seemed to capture everything the vault had revealed. "It starts inside before it spreads out." That line marked the beginning of his final transformation, from a man defending himself to one fortifying himself. The next section of the vault would show that once Michael lost faith in people, he began placing his faith in something else entirely. Songs from the Vault, the King's Last Defense. In a separate steel drawer at the back of the chamber, investigators found what many consider the most personal cache in the entire vault. According to internal notes, more than 200 unreleased songs were stored there. Early listeners described them as raw and unfiltered. They did not sound like the polished singles that defined his public life. They felt closer, rougher, and at times unsettling. Several tracks began as studio sketches, then turned into full confessions on tape. The lyrics did not name names. They spoke in code that was easy to understand once you knew the battles he fought. Ownership, betrayal, resurrection. One chorus circled the same line again and again. "When truth is buried deep, rhythm will dig it out." In another fragment, his voice softened as he spoke about children, not as accusation, but as devotion. "God loves them," he whispered. "Innocent souls. They don't know hate." Then the tone changed, sharper, defiant. "They twist love into sin when they can't feel it themselves." Hearing it now, after everything, the message feels unmistakable. A man trying to clear his name without ever saying the words. Handwritten pages sat on top of the reels. Some were chord charts, some were verse drafts with crossed-out lines and simple corrections. On one cover sheet, he had written 3 words, "My final deposition." According to people who cataloged the vault, he treated this drawer like a legal record set to music. If lawyers twisted statements, the songs would hold the meaning he could not say in interviews. Producers who heard fragments said the tone shocked them. The voice was steady, but the intent was sharper than anything on his released albums. A few describe the material as confessional and prophetic at the same time. He was singing about a fight that had not ended and a truth that would survive him. Some who worked with him in his final years reported that these sessions often started after midnight. He would turn off the lights, record a take, and speak a line into the room as if answering a question only he could hear. Many of the tracks remain locked. Estate controls and legal conditions limit access, and several files are encrypted with keys held by a small number of trustees. According to unverified reports, a portion of the catalog is subject to agreements that delay release until certain disputes fully resolve. That legal wall has created its own argument. Some believe these songs should stay private. Others argue that they are evidence of what he endured and that the public deserves to hear them. What is certain is their purpose. The songs mirror the vault itself. They are a final act of resistance. They are a way for truth to speak when every other channel failed. Even if no court reopens a file, the music exists. Even if a network refuses to air a correction, the melody does not forget. Today, the Neverland Vault remains sealed to most of the world. It is half myth and half message. It whispers that even legends can be rewritten, but not erased. If the day comes when these recordings are released, they may not only change how we see Michael Jackson, they may change how we see the forces that work to silence him. So what do you think really happened? Was Michael Jackson silenced by scandal or by something far bigger than anyone ever admitted? Share your theory in the comments because the world still hasn't heard the full story.